On March the 5th, 1936, the first prototype Spitfire K5054 made its first flight from the Supermarine Works at Eastleigh, piloted by Captain Mutt Summers. On May the 6th, 1996, at the Imperial War Museum at Duxford in Cambridgeshire, an airshow took place to celebrate the 60th anniversary of R.J. Mitchell's classic fighter. An amazing 21 Spitfires were due to take part in one of the largest gatherings of Spitfires since the end of World War II. On the day, the flight line contained 11 different marks of Spitfire, including a replica of the prototype, a Mark 1A, a Mark II, 2 Mark 5s, a Mark 8, a whole collection of Mark 9s, a Mark 11, 2 Mark 14s and 2 Mark 16s, a Mark 19 and finally a Mark 24. Amazingly, 19 of these aircraft were capable of flight. Only the prototype replica and the Mark 24 were static examples. With the finale due to feature a 14 Spitfire scramble, the day held much promise. For pilots, show day starts with a briefing in the control tower from David Henchy, the Airfield Services Manager. Safety is the key concern. There are strict guidelines laid down by the CAA covering air shows, and these have to be followed.
If you find yourself approaching a manoeuvre at the wrong height or the wrong speed,
another area of concern is the view the crowd will get.
And when I'm on display lines, heights. What I would actually like you to do is, first of all, what you must do. You must fly to your no lower than your actual DA, whatever that may be. 30 feet is normally the lowest that people have been authorized to, but if your DA is higher than that, then not below your DA height. I would like you to fly most of your routines at 50 feet above the airfield. That's so that the crowd, we've got a big crowd here today, they will be quite deep on the crowd line, and if you're too low, a lot of people won't see that.
In fact, the crowd is almost 35,000, with hundreds of people still trying to get in, even after the show has started. While the pilots are being briefed, the ground crews are hard at work, preparing the aircraft for their displays. Most of the behind-the-scenes work is never seen by the public. But without the attention these crews pay the aircraft, none of these machines would ever fly. With the briefing over, pilots begin to walk out to their aircraft to prepare for their displays. Every element of the display has to be carefully worked out, especially the difficult formation sequences. The control tower also have a difficult job. As well as the displaying aircraft, there are dozens of light aircraft that fly in for the display, and these have to be given landing slots and parking spaces before the show can begin.
Plastic 4, take over your discretion 0205 to 10.
At least one veteran of World War II would be taking to the skies in a Spitfire on the day. George Unwin, a Battle of Britain fighter pilot, was given the chance to fly in the back seat of Carolyn Grace's aircraft before the show.
RPM's in the same similar position, though not the right angle.
That'll work. That'll work.
That's working there. We normally see on startup about 120. Once we've got up to height and cooled down, she'll probably settle at about 80.
As the aircraft takes off, it's fitting that at least one of the few should take to the air in Mitchell's classic creation. The first Merlin engines crackled into life, signifying the start of the afternoon's displays. The first aircraft due to display is Spitfire Mark IX MH434, flown by Ray Hanna, a former leader of the Red Arrows. Ray first flew this Spitfire in 1970 and has flown it almost continuously for the last 26 years. This gives him a unique view on the qualities of the aircraft.
It's still, of all the so-called warbirds, it is still the most pleasant of any to fly. It's a pilot's airplane. It has no vices. Well, it has, the shape in itself has a certain charisma to it, I think, that no other World War II airplane has. And the fact of the matter is that the handling is purely delightful, particularly at low and medium speeds. At very high speeds, the ailerons are maybe a little bit heavy. But over and above that, it's a very difficult airplane or fighter to fault.
So the afternoon starts with a display by the master, Ray Hanna, in MH434. Of all the surviving airworthy Spitfires, MH434 is probably the best known. It's appeared in countless films, including The Battle of Britain and Operation Crossbow. Built in 1943, this aircraft flew with 222 Natal Squadron at Hornchurch in Essex. It scored a number of kills in its operational career, as well as the RAF. It served with the Royal Netherlands Air Force and the Belgian Air Force too. MH434 is one of the many Mark IX variants at the show. The Mark IX was produced as a response to the Focke-Wulf 190, which was superior to earlier marks of Spitfire. When the 9 first entered service, the Luftwaffe's pilots still thought they were earlier Spitfires and got a great shock when the aircraft matched and, in some respects, bettered the performance of the 190. One of the first Spitfires on the circuit, MH434's displays have been delighting airshow crowds for 25 years. Ray Hanna is acknowledged by other pilots as the master of the Spitfire display. His manoeuvres always display a precision that makes his routine unique. No celebration of the Spitfire would be complete without an appearance by the Hawker Hurricane. This example is one of 2 that are part of the Battle of Britain memorial flight. The other one is currently undergoing restoration to flying condition. The BBMF's Mark II taxis out with a couple of passengers on the back to take off for its display with the Spitfire Mark V and the Hurricane. The next aircraft to display is the 2-seater Grace Spitfire, another Mark IX variant. This aircraft was meticulously restored by Nick Grace and first flew again in 1985. Tragically, Nick was killed in a road accident in 1988. His widow Carolyn was determined to keep the aircraft in the family, and she is now the only woman display pilot currently flying Spitfires in the world. During World War II, this was the first Allied fighter to shoot down an enemy aircraft on D-Day. It served in many roles during its career, including shipping patrols, fighter sweeps, escort duties and dive bombing. It was subsequently converted to a 2-seater configuration by Vickers after the war. Next came the Gloucester Gladiator and the Bristol Blenheim in its new colour scheme for 1996. Another Merlin engine roars through the Duxford skies. This time it belongs to the Hurricane, often the forgotten aircraft of the Battle of Britain. Designed by Sidney Cam, the Hurricane first entered service in 1937 and caused a stir among the general public with its high speeds and amazing manoeuvrability. The Hurricane was a superb fighter and more than a match for the early Messerschmitt 109s. Along with the Spitfire, the Hurricane was the mainstay of the beleaguered RAF during the crucial Battle of Britain. It destroyed more enemy aircraft than all other British defences put together, whether on the ground or in the air. This is a Mark II version, and the display graphically shows the aircraft's performance. Here we see the Blenheim taxiing into position, dwarfed by the much larger B-17. Next to display are the Spitfires, Mark II and Mark V of the BBMF. The Bristol Blenheim, flown by John Webb, takes off for its display, followed by the much larger B-17 Sally B. This Mark II is acknowledged to be the world's oldest airworthy Spitfire. It was the 14th of nearly 12,000 to be built at the Castle Bromwich Works in Birmingham. It too was a star of the film The Battle of Britain. Because it was an early Mark, it was used extensively during the filming and features heavily in the film. The next BBMF aircraft to display is the Mark V. This particular aircraft first entered service in 1941 with 222 Squadron at North Weald. It's probably best known as the aircraft that Spitfire test pilot Geoffrey Quill used to display after the war. These aircraft are affectionately known as baby Spits and are kept in immaculate condition by ground crews at RAF Coningsby in Lincolnshire. More Merlin engines crackled towards their display, only this time in the two P-51D Mustangs. These are followed by the Fighter Collection's P-63 King Cobra. The final flyby from the BBMF is a tribute to the Battle of Britain, with two Spitfires and a Hurricane. A truly memorable sight. A notable absentee from the displays was Messerschmitt 109 Black 6, whose only flight of the day was for an air test. This is the most original surviving 109 with the powerful Daimler-Benz engine. A remarkable restoration of one of the century's most powerful fighters and the only true enemy presence at the show. Next comes the smooth sound of three Bristol Mercury engines in the Blenheim and Gladiator. Both these aircraft are the only flying examples left of their type. More American aircraft taxi out for their displays in the shape of the P-38 Lightning and the P-47 Thunderbolt. Another flypast from this unique formation, which unfortunately should have included another Mercury engine in a Westland Lysander, but it experienced starting difficulties and was unable to display. From this radial engine pair is the Shuttleworth Collection Gloucester Gladiator, which first entered service with the RAF in 1937, the same year as the Hurricane. Superbly manoeuvrable, the Gladiator saw action in the Norwegian campaign and in the defence of Malta. Now the two Mercury engines of the Bristol Blenheim, nicknamed the Forgotten Bomber, as its importance in the early years of World War II was largely overlooked in subsequent histories of the conflict. This example is the second restoration of the type by a dedicated team of engineers at the Aircraft Restoration Company. The first restoration was destroyed in a crash just a few weeks after it first flew, and amazingly, the team decided they would restore a second aircraft to flying condition. The Blenheim is displaying in Coastal Command markings of 254 Squadron. Blenheim served in every command and in every theatre of combat during World War II. This sole example of the type flies today in tribute to all the brave air crews that flew and fought in them. This is Squadron Leader Paul Day of the BBMF getting into the flight's Mark 19 Spitfire in preparation for the next display. Steve Newjane and Andy Gent, two instructors from 19 Squadron, prepare for their display. Last year, they became the first 19 Squadron pilots in decades to fly a Spitfire. The significance of this is that in August 1938, 19 Squadron, then based here at Duxford, became the first RAF squadron to operate Spitfires. The opportunity to fly the finest was presented to them by the Old Flying Machine Company. They both flew the PR Mark 11 Spitfire belonging to Chris Horsley, only one of two examples of this mark in flying condition. As these shots show, the experience was extremely memorable. Back of the show, the two Hawks and the Spitfire 19 prepare to take to the skies in a tribute to 19 Squadron. The Catalina, owned by Plain Sailing, taxis past camera. Flown by Paul Warren Wilson and John Romaine, who is normally in the pilot's seat of the Blenheim. These Hawks, based at RAF Valley in Wales, are the principal training aircraft of the Royal Air Force. They'll be more familiar to people painted in the colour scheme of the red arrows. The Hawk is also exported to other countries and is also used in the fighter role. The Spitfire 19 was one of the later Mark Spitfires, powered by the Rolls-Royce Griffon engine. A photo reconnaissance version of the aircraft, the Griffon engine was substantially more powerful than the Merlin. By this time, the Spitfire had evolved into an almost completely different aircraft than earlier Marks, but still bore some of the familiar characteristics of the design. As the Catalina takes off for its display, a unique collection of American aircraft formates up in the distance. As a tribute to the 8th Air Force, who operated out of Duxford during the Second World War, a formation including a B-17, P-38, two P-51s, P-38 and P-47 prepared to perform a memorable flypast. The first aircraft to display from the formation is the Lockheed P-38 Lightning. Called the Fork-tailed Devil by the Japanese, it served in all theatres of combat. This is a P-38K variant and is owned and operated by the Fighter Collection based here at Duxford. It's the only example currently flying in Europe. Next to display is the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt. Another Fighter Collection aircraft, this is painted in the colours of the commander of the 78th Fighter Group as No Guts, No Glory. It's affectionately known as Fat Albert. The Thunderbolt was originally designed as an interceptor fighter, but it eventually found a role as a hard-hitting ground attack aircraft. While the Thunderbolt and Lightning display, the B-17 Sally B continues its flybys. This one giving the crowd a view of its open bomb bay. Although it looks as if the Sally B has a problem, in fact this is the smoke system, fitted for its work on the film Memphis Belle. Now two North American P-51D Mustangs fly in for their display. The first aircraft is another part of the Fighter Collection and wears the colours of the 362nd Fighter Squadron of the 8th Air Force. It has the personal markings of Lieutenant Moose Beecroft, who flew the aircraft here in the UK during World War II. The second aircraft belongs to Dave Gilmore's Intrepid Aviation Company and was built in North American's factory at Inglewood in California and served with the US AAF after the war. The Mustang was originally developed to meet the requirement of an advanced fighter for the RAF. Like the Spitfire, it's a classic example of design with aerodynamic innovations, such as the laminar flow ring. Originally fitted with an Allison engine, its performance decreased significantly at altitude. This is obviously not a desirable characteristic for a fighter, so it was decided to try fitting the Merlin engine to the airframe. The results of early testing showed the Mustangs to be capable of speeds of 440 miles per hour. This so impressed the USAAF that it started ordering Mustangs in large quantities. The Mustang proved immensely popular with pilots, and more importantly, it had a range to escort bombers right into the heart of Germany and the Japanese Empire. It could compete with almost any enemy fighter and emerge victorious. It was arguably the most important fighter of World War II. The final American fighter to display is the Bell P-63 King Cobra. This fighter collection aircraft served with the USAAF for a short time before it was demobbed. In the late 1940s, it took part in the Bendix Air Races, a fate reserved for many World War II American aircraft types. This aircraft flew again after intensive restoration in 1994, and it's the only example of its type flying in Europe. The P-63 was designed as a close support fighter bomber and was extensively deployed by the Russian Air Force, which received more than 2,400 of the type. The Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress is probably the best-known bomber of World War II. Unfortunately, during daylight operations, their losses were high. They were vulnerable to head-on attack by German fighters. When the P-51 arrived as a long-range fighter escort, the B-17's effectiveness increased significantly, and in the closing stages of the war, they dealt devastating blows to the Germans. A welcome sight to many a downed Spitfire pilot in the sea must have been this one, the consolidated PBY Catalina. Used extensively by Coastal Command, These aircraft filled a number of roles, including maritime patrol and search and rescue. Its enormous wingspan of over 100 feet contained fuel tanks to give it an amazing range, over 2,500 miles, and it could stay aloft for over 20 hours at a time. This example is painted in the colours of 210 Squadron aircraft, in which Flight Officer J.A. Cruikshank earned a Victoria Cross after pressing home an attack on a U-boat in July of 1944. This aircraft regularly operates off the water and displays throughout Europe during the airshow season. As the Catalina makes its final fly past the line of assembled Spitfires, the climax of the show is about to start. A lone Messerschmitt 108 strafes the airfield, and 14 of the Spitfires get the order to scramble to intercept the intruder. What follows is a remarkable sight, with 14 Spitfires and a lone Hurricane taxiing out to chase away the enemy. fighters take off to prepare for the finale of the show, 3 memorable display sequences. The first sequence is a tail chase, featuring the Fighter Collection's Hurricane, Proteus Petroleum's Mark 1A Spitfire, and the Shuttleworth Collection's Mark V. This display highlights the performance of these earlier fighters. The Fighter Collection's Hurricane is painted in the markings of Eagle Squadron. These were American pilots who volunteered for combat service before the USA entered the war. A fully aerobatic version of Hawker's finest creation, this aircraft always puts on an impressive display. Another of the oldest surviving Spitfires is this Mark 1A, another veteran of the Battle of Britain movie. It currently appears in the markings of 609 Squadron and is housed at the Blue Max Movie Museum at Wickham Air Park. The Mark 5C is yet another Battle of Britain movie star and is in a clipped-wing version of the fighter. This increases its roll rate. Watching the display gives you a good idea of the amazing agility of these early World War II fighters. Next to display are the later marks of Spitfire. 1 Mark 9, 2 Mark 14s, all owned by the Fighter Collection. This display shows how the performance of the Spitfire improved once the Griffon engines were fitted. TFC's first Mark 14 is a low-back version and is painted in the silver colours of 2 Squadron of the post-war RAF. TFC's second Mark 14 is a high-back version and is in the markings of Squadron Leader James Ginger Lacey, who served with Southeast Asia Command in Malaysia in 1945. The final aircraft is a clip-wing LF Mark 9. It was one of the first aircraft to land in France after D-Day and has a number of kills to its credit, including 2 109s. The difference in performance between the aircraft is obvious, with the 2 Griffons having more of a growl than the Merlin. As the previous 3 aircraft land, the highlight of the day approaches. A formation of 9 Spitfires led by Ray Hanna in MH434. A magnificent recreation of what the skies over Duxford must have looked like in the late 30s. The sight and sound of these Spitfires together must bring back many memories to the veterans at the show. There are more Spitfires flying today than at any time since the 50s, and their numbers are increasing annually. Hopefully in another 60 years, there will still be many flying examples of the fighter left for future generations. The formation is still recognisable in the distance, as the distinctive shape of the Spitfire is silhouetted against the unchanging landscape of Cambridgeshire, giving the crowd a unique view. The roar of Merlins shake the ground once again as the sky fills with Spitfires diving to make their low passes along the display line. it's fitting that the final display of the day should be Ray Hanna once again in MH434 on the day when the brilliance of Mitchell's design was celebrated. It's important to remember the brave pilots and ground crew that flew and supported these aircraft during World War II. In numerous countries and far differing landscapes, they fought bravely in these wonderful machines in defense of the freedom of the world. So many of them gave up their lives, but they will not be forgotten when so many of these aircraft survive to remind us of their heroism and sacrifice. During the war, William Walton wrote a piece of music especially for the Spitfire to spur on the workers in the factories building the aircraft. It's a suitable ending to a celebration of the world's best-known fighter aircraft, the Spitfire.